My phone rang at 6 in the morning. It was a message from Lucy, my daughter. "Thanks for the money, Mom. Now Richard and I can live the life of our dreams. Don't look for us." My heart stopped for a second. Then it started beating so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. I ran to the guest room where I had left the black bag with $15 million. The chest was open, empty. Lucy and Richard had disappeared in the early morning, taking what they thought was my entire fortune. I sat on the edge of the bed holding the phone with trembling hands. I read the message again. 1, 2, 3 times. The words stabbed into my soul like sharp daggers. Don't look for us. As if I were a stranger. As if I weren't the woman who had raised her alone for 22 years after her father abandoned us. As if I wasn't the one who had worked double shifts at the hospital to pay for the private college she wanted so badly. The room was spinning around me. The smell of the lavender air freshener Lucy had put out the night before. Now it made me sick. Everything was exactly the same. The pale pink bedspread I had bought for when she visited, the lace curtains I had sewn myself thinking of her comfort, the family photos on the nightstand, showing us together at her graduations, her birthdays, our trips. I picked up one of those photographs. It was from her wedding day 3 years ago. I was standing next to her, radiant in my gold dress, holding her hand, while Richard looked at her with those eyes that I now know were filled with ambition, not love. I had spent my savings on that wedding, $30,000, so she could have the perfect day she had always dreamed of. The church filled with white flowers, the wedding dress imported from Paris, the reception at the most elegant hotel in the city. "Mom, you're the best in the world," she had whispered in my ear that day. "I don't know what Richard and I would do without you." Her words sounded so sincere, so full of genuine gratitude. Now I understood. Even then, they were already planning how to get everything they could from me. Every hug, every "I love you, Mom," every Sunday visit had been calculated, measured, designed to keep me giving and giving until I was empty. My fingers traced the glass of the photograph, stopping on my own smile. 68 years of life, 45 of them dedicated completely to Lucy. I had given up opportunities for love, for travel, for personal pleasures, all to make sure she had the best. When Richard appeared in her life 5 years ago, I welcomed him with open arms. A successful engineer, he said. A man who would make her happy, I thought. The first alarm bell should have been when they started asking me for loans. Small at first. $1,000 to fix Richard's car, $3,000 for the deposit on their new apartment, $5,000 for this business they were going to start together, always with promises of repayment that never came, always with explanations that sounded reasonable at the time, but now in hindsight were clearly elaborate lies. The phone vibrated again. Another message from Lucy. "I know you're angry, but someday you'll understand. We deserved this chance. We've been struggling for a long time." Struggling. The word burned inside me. She didn't know what real struggle was. She didn't know what it was to work 16 hours a day as a nurse, to come home with swollen feet and hands cracked from disinfectants, only to find her college tuition bills waiting in the mailbox. I got up and walked to the window. The sun was beginning to rise, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It was a beautiful dawn, but I could only see betrayal reflected in every ray of light. My neighbors were starting their morning routines, Mr. Johnson watering his garden, Mrs. Davis going out to get the newspaper, the kids across the street waiting for the school bus. Normal life, normal routine, while my world was quietly crumbling behind these walls. I went back to the guest room and sat on the floor next to the empty chest. The hinges still held the metallic smell of the money I had put there the night before. Money I had withdrawn from the bank so carefully, explaining to the manager that I needed to make a large purchase in cash. My dream house, I had told him, my golden retirement after decades of hard work. But now there was no house. There was no golden retirement. There was only an empty bag and the echo of my daughter's words ringing in my head like an emotional death sentence. I closed my eyes and let the memories flood over me like an unstoppable avalanche. Lucy was 5 years old when she promised me that one day she would buy me a big house so we could be happy together. We were sitting in the small 2-bedroom apartment where we lived after the divorce, eating instant soup because it was all we could afford that week. Her chubby little hands held the spoon awkwardly as she told me in that sweet little voice, "Mommy, when I grow up, I'm going to work a lot and give you everything you deserve." What a cruel irony of fate. Now she had everything I had given her, and I was left with empty hands and a shattered heart. I got up from the floor and walked to my room where I kept a shoebox full of memories. I took it out of the closet carefully, as if it were a sacred treasure, and opened it on the bed. There they were, all the letters Lucy had written to me when she was in college. "Dear Mommy," one of them read, "Thank you for sacrificing so much for me. I know you work extra weekends to pay for my books and my dorm. I promise that when I graduate, all of this will be worth it. Someday, I will pay you back every cent with interest. But most of all, I will give you all the love and gratitude you deserve. You are my hero." My tears fell on the ink, staining the words that had once filled me with hope and pride. I picked up another letter, this one from her senior year. "Mommy, I'm graduating soon. I've been thinking about everything you've done for me. You never took a vacation because you preferred to save for my studies. You never bought new clothes because my education was your priority. When I get my first job as a lawyer, the first thing I'll do is take you to Europe just like you always dreamed." Europe. That promise echoed in my mind like a cruel joke. Instead of taking me to Europe, she had stolen the possibility of any trip, of any dream, of any peaceful future. I kept reading letters, each one more painful than the last. Promises of eternal love, of infinite gratitude, of taking care of me in my old age, just as I had taken care of her in her childhood. I went to the photo album I kept in the living room. Every page was a testament to my unconditional devotion. There was Lucy at 8 years old, smiling with her front teeth missing as she held her academic honor roll certificate. I had worked double shifts for a month to pay for the private math tutoring she needed. On the next page, at 12 years old, posing proudly in her new uniform for the most expensive private school in the city. I had sold my grandmother's jewelry to pay the tuition. At 16, radiant in her red high school graduation dress. That dress had cost me a week's salary, but seeing her happiness had been worth every penny. Or so I thought at the time. At 20, at her college graduation ceremony, hugging me tightly as she whispered. I understood that all my sacrifices finally made sense, but there were more photographs that hurt in a special way, the ones from the last 5 years, since Richard came into our lives. In them, I always appeared smiling, but now I could see something different in my eyes, a subtle sadness, a feeling that something had changed. Richard always seemed to be evaluating me, measuring my financial worth more than my worth as a person. I remembered the first time they asked me to borrow money. Lucy had come alone without Richard, and she had sat on the same sofa where I was now crying. "Mommy, we need help. Richard lost his job and we have debts. We just need $5,000 to get by. I promise we'll pay you back in 3 months. I didn't think twice. She was my daughter, my reason for living. Of course I would help her. 3 months turned into 6, 6 into a year, and a year into never. When I asked them about the money, they always had a new excuse, a new emergency, a new promise that they would pay me soon. Richard's business is about to take off, Lucy would say. We just need a little more time. And I, like the fool I was, kept waiting and kept giving. The second time they asked for $10,000, the third, $15,000. Each loan was bigger than the last, each promise more elaborate, each lie more believable, until we reached the point where they had practically emptied my life savings from work. But I always had the peace of mind that it was for my daughter, for her happiness, for her future. The phone rang again. This time it was a call, not a message. Lucy's name appeared on the screen. For a moment my heart sped up with the hope that she had changed her mind, that she was calling to apologize, that this was all a horrible nightmare I was about to wake up from. I answered with a broken voice. Lucy. Mommy, I know you're upset, but I need you to understand. Richard and I have been planning this for a long time. We knew you had that money saved for the house, and frankly, we think that at your age, you don't need it as much as we do. We're young. We have dreams, plans. You've already lived your life. Her words pierced me like bullets. You've already lived your life, as if at 68 I was an old piece of furniture that had lost its usefulness, as if my dreams, my plans, my desires didn't matter simply because I had gotten older. Rage began to boil in my stomach, mixing with the pain until it created a toxic brew that burned me from the inside. Lucy, that money was for my house, for my retirement. I worked 40 years to save it. My voice was shaking, but not from sadness, but from a fury that was growing like an out-of-control fire. You're my daughter. I gave you everything, absolutely everything I had. How could you do this to me? Her laugh on the other end of the line was like a slap in the face. Oh, Mommy, always so dramatic. Look, Richard and I are going to use this money to move to Costa Rica. We're going to open a boutique hotel on the beach. It's a smart investment, not like buying a house that will only cost you money. You should be proud that your money is being used for something productive for once. Productive, my money, earned with sweat, tears, and years of my life, was finally productive in the hands of my thieving daughter. And what am I supposed to do now? Where am I going to live when I can no longer pay the rent on this apartment? My voice broke, showing her my vulnerability once again. I don't know, Mommy. I guess you'll have to find a job again, or move into one of those nursing homes. Richard says there are some really good cheap ones on the outskirts of the city. It will be good for you to socialize with people your age. Her tone was casual, as if she were talking about the weather, not about destroying her own mother's life. I hung up the phone, my hands shaking with anger. I stood in the middle of the living room, breathing heavily, feeling the reality of the situation settle in my mind like wet cement. My daughter had not only robbed me, she had planned my destruction with a coldness that chilled my blood. And worst of all, she justified it as if it were a favor they were doing for me. I walked to my desk and pulled out the folder where I kept all the receipts and proof of the loans I had given them over the years. I spread them out on the dining room table like a detective building a case. 5,000 here, 10,000 there, 15,000 for Richard's medical emergency that turned out to be a lie, 20,000 for the business that never existed. Each paper was a knife in my back, tangible proof of how I had been systematically scammed by my own blood. In total, over the last 5 years, I had given them more than $200,000, money I had saved penny by penny, working extra shifts, denying myself small pleasures, living on the bare minimum to make sure my daughter was happy. I picked up my phone and dialed my bank's number. I needed to know exactly how much I had left, what my options were, how I could survive without the $15 million I had lost. Well, what they thought I had lost, because there was the detail that Lucy and Richard didn't know, the secret that made me smile despite the pain. The money they had taken was not real. The night before, while I was putting the bag in Lucy's chest, I had a strange premonition. Something in the way Richard had looked at me, something in the questions he had asked about the money, had set off an alarm in my maternal instinct. So at the last moment, I had swapped the real bills for prop money that I had bought years ago for a church play. 15 million in perfectly convincing fake bills had left my house in that black bag. Meanwhile, the real money was safe in a bank vault waiting patiently for me. Lucy and Richard had stolen painted paper, and it would probably take them days or even weeks to find out, especially if they were in the middle of their trip to Costa Rica. But I couldn't laugh yet. The pain of the betrayal was real, even if the theft was fake. My daughter had shown her true colors. She had revealed that she was capable of destroying her own mother without the slightest remorse. That wound would never heal, no matter how much money I had in the bank. I poured myself a cup of chamomile tea and sat in front of the window. The neighbors continued their normal routines, oblivious to the drama unfolding in my house. Mrs. Davis was pruning her roses, Mr. Johnson was washing his car, The children were playing in the street. Simple life, honest life, a life without betrayal or lies. For the first time in years, maybe in decades, I began to think about myself. What did I want to do with the rest of my life? Who was Beatrice beyond being Lucy's mother? I had spent so much time defining myself through my daughter that I had forgotten I had my own identity, my own dreams, my own life to live. The phone rang again. This time it was an unknown number, I hesitated before answering, but I finally did. Beatrice. The voice was young female, familiar but different. It's Emily, your neighbor Linda's daughter. I heard very loud voices this morning and wanted to make sure you were okay. Emily was 20 years old and studying psychology at the university. I had watched her grow up since she was a little girl, always polite, always worried about others. Her mother Linda and I had been neighbors for 15 years, and Emily had been like a second granddaughter to me, especially after Lucy got married and the visits became less frequent and more self-serving. I'm fine, Emily. Thank you for asking. I tried to make my voice sound normal, but the tears were still fresh on my cheeks. I just had a little family argument. Nothing serious. Lying had become so natural when it came to protecting Lucy's image that the words came out automatically. Beatrice, don't lie to me. I've known you since I was little, and I know when something is killing you inside. Her voice was soft, but firm. I saw Lucy and Richard leave very early with suitcases and a large bag. Afterwards, I heard screaming and crying coming from your house. What really happened? The genuine concern in her voice broke me. It had been so long since someone cared about me without wanting something in return that I started to cry again. Emily, I think I need to talk to someone. Could you come over? Is your mom home? Mom went shopping, but I'm here. I'll be right over in 5 minutes. She hung up before I could protest. 5 minutes later, I heard her soft knock on the door. When I opened it, Emily looked at me with those brown eyes full of compassion that reminded me what it felt like to be seen as a human being, not as a source of money. She sat with me on the sofa and waited patiently while I gathered the courage to tell her the whole story. I told her about the years of sacrifice, the loans that were never repaid, the money they thought they had stolen. Lucy's cruel words on the phone. Emily listened without judging, occasionally taking my hand to give me strength. Beatrice, what they did to you is not okay. That's not love. It's abuse. Her words were like a ray of light in the darkness of my confusion. A daughter who truly loves you would never steal from you like that, would never talk to you that way. The fact that you're her mother doesn't give them the right to treat you like their personal property. But she's my daughter, Emily. I love her more than my own life. Everything I did was for her happiness. The words came out choked between sobs. Maybe I have to accept that I've served my purpose as a mother, and now I have to step aside so she can be happy. Emily stood up from the sofa abruptly. No, that's exactly what they want you to think. Beatrice, you are an incredible woman. You've worked your whole life. You've raised a daughter practically alone. You've been a nurse for decades, saving lives. Your value doesn't end just because your daughter decides to be an ungrateful brat. Her words hit me like an awakening. It had been so long since anyone had seen me as Beatrice the nurse, Beatrice the strong woman, Beatrice the survivor. I was only seen as Beatrice the mother, Beatrice the provider, Beatrice the one who always says yes. But what do I do now? I can't pretend this never happened. First, you need to protect yourself. Do they have access to your bank accounts? Do they know your passwords? Can they keep stealing from you? Emily had completely switched from a compassionate young woman to a determined strategist. Second, you need to decide if you are going to let this continue, or if you are going to take control of your own life. The word control echoed in my mind. When was the last time I had control over anything in my life? Everything revolved around what Lucy needed, what Lucy wanted, what would make Lucy happy. Even my financial decisions were based on making sure she would be comfortable in the future. Emily, there's something I haven't told you. I explained about the fake money, about my last-minute gut feeling, about how the real money was safe in the bank. Her eyes lit up with a mixture of admiration and surprise. "Beatrice, you are incredible. Your instinct saved you from total ruin. But the emotional damage is already done. My daughter betrayed me. She talked to me like I was trash. She planned to rob me with a coldness that scares me." I broke down again, but this time the tears were mixed with something different. It wasn't just pain anymore. It was also anger, a clean, justified anger that was starting to grow in my chest. "Beatrice, do you know what this means? It means you have the power. And they think they stole everything from you, that they left you helpless. But you are in control of the situation. You can decide what to do with that information." Emily leaned towards me, her eyes shining with determination. "You can continue to be the victim, or you can become the woman who makes the decisions." Her words ignited something inside me that had been dormant for too long. Power, control, decisions, concepts I had forgotten belonged to me. But what can I do? They're my family. I can't just cut them out of my life. "Why not? They clearly cut you out of theirs. They told you not to look for them, that you've already lived your life, that you're a burden. Why do you have to follow the rules of unconditional love when they don't?" Emily was right, but admitting it meant accepting a reality that terrified me. I stayed silent for several minutes, digesting Emily's words. For the first time in years, someone was giving me permission to put my own needs first. The idea scared me and excited me at the same time. "Emily, I'm scared. If I cut ties with Lucy, I'll be completely alone. She's the only family I have left." "Beatrice, you are already alone. The difference is that right now you are alone and being abused, manipulated, and stolen from. If you cut those toxic ties, you will be alone, but free." Emily took my hands in hers. "Besides, you're not as alone as you think. You have neighbors who appreciate you. You have a lifetime of experience. You have resources they don't know exist." She was right. For years I had been so focused on Lucy that I had neglected other relationships, other possibilities for human connection. Linda had always been kind to me. Mr. Johnson waved to me every morning. Mrs. Davis brought me vegetables from her garden. There was a community around me that I had completely ignored. "I need time to think." I got up from the sofa and walked to the kitchen to make another tea. Emily followed me, clearly determined not to leave me alone at this crucial moment. "You know what hurts the most? It's not just that they stole from me. It's that they lied to me for so long. Every 'I love you, Mom,' every hug, every Sunday visit was fake. Or maybe not all of it was fake. Maybe Lucy did love you, but Richard corrupted her. Maybe she's just as manipulated as you were." Emily leaned against the kitchen door frame. "But that doesn't change the fact that she hurt you deeply and that you need to protect yourself." The kettle whistled, and I poured the hot water over the tea bag. The familiar aroma calmed me a little. "Emily, if you were me, what would you do?" It was a dangerous question, because I knew her answer could change the course of my life forever. "If I were you, I would take control of the situation. I would let them find out for themselves that the money is fake. I would let them get to Costa Rica, make their plans, maybe even spend real money on the trip, only to discover that it was all an illusion." Her eyes sparkled with a poetic justice that I found strangely appealing. "That would be cruel," I protested weakly, but a part of me was already savoring the idea. They're far from home, in a foreign country. If they find out the money is fake, they'll be stranded. "Beatrice, they were cruel to you first. They robbed you, humiliated you, told you your life isn't worth anything anymore. Why do you have to be the only one acting with compassion in this situation?" Emily had a valid point that I couldn't argue with. My phone rang again. This time it was Richard. I hesitated before answering, but Emily motioned for me to pick it up. "Hello, Richard." My voice sounded colder than I had intended. "Beatrice, I know you're probably upset, but I wanted to explain why we did what we did. Are you going to explain why you stole my life savings? The sarcasm in my voice surprised even me. Emily smiled and gave me an approving nod. Look, don't see it as theft. See it as an investment in your family's future. Lucy and I are going to do something big with this money. My family, Richard, you just robbed me and kicked me out of my own family. What future are you talking about? My words were firmer now, fueled by the outrage that Emily had helped awaken in me. Besides, I'm curious. Have you already verified that all the money is in order? There was a long pause on the other end of the line. What do you mean by that? His voice had lost its arrogant confidence. Oh, nothing important. I was just wondering if you'd had time to count it all, to verify that the bills are in good condition. Beatrice, don't play games with me. Is there something we need to know about that money? Now he sounded worried, almost paranoid. The seed of doubt had been planted. Richard, son, you were the one who decided to steal the money without asking me. Now you have to live with the consequences of your decisions. I hung up the phone with a smile I hadn't felt in years. Emily clapped softly. That was perfect. You're going to drive them crazy with worry. It was true. He would probably spend the next few hours obsessively checking every bill, looking for any sign that something was wrong. Emily, I feel different, like I've woken up from a very long dream. It was true. For the first time in decades, I felt like I had some control over my own life. It's liberating, isn't it? Realizing that you don't have to be the victim in your own story. We walked back to the living room, and I sat in front of the mirror that hung over the fireplace. The woman looking back at me had eyes red from crying. But there was also something new in her expression. Determination, strength, a spark that had been extinguished for too long. Emily, you know what, I'm going to do something I should have done years ago. I got up and went to my desk where I kept my checkbook. I'm going to cancel all the additional credit cards I gave to Lucy and Richard. I'm going to change all my account passwords. I'm going to take total control of my finances. Excellent. And what else? Emily was clearly excited to see me take action. I'm going to live my life. I'm going to use my money for myself. I'm going to travel. I'm going to buy myself nice clothes. I'm going to eat in elegant restaurants. I'm going to do all the things I didn't do because I was saving for Lucy's future. For the first time all day, I felt completely clear-headed and focused. My daughter's betrayal had been painful, but it had also been an involuntary gift. It had freed me from an emotional prison I had been living in without even realizing it. I spent the rest of the morning making phone calls I should have made years ago. First, I called the bank and canceled all the additional cards Lucy and Richard had. The representative asked me if I had been a victim of fraud, and for the first time in my life, I answered with complete honesty. Yes, I was scammed by my own family. Then I changed all my online account passwords. From the bank to the social media I rarely used. Each new password was like closing a door I had left open for too long. Emily stayed with me through the whole process, making lunch and making sure I didn't lose the momentum of self-protection I had found. Beatrice, are you hungry? I made some sandwiches. Emily appeared in the doorway of my makeshift office with a plate in her hands. I haven't eaten anything since yesterday. I realized it was true. Between the anxiety of guarding the money and the shock of the betrayal, I had completely forgotten to feed myself. We sat down to eat at the dining room table, where all the receipts for the unpaid loans were still spread out. Emily looked at them closely. Beatrice, this is evidence of a pattern of financial abuse. If you wanted to, you could press legal charges against them. The idea was both terrifying and tempting. I don't know if I could do that. She's still my daughter. The words came out automatically, the conditioned reflex of years of protecting Lucy from the consequences of her actions. Emily looked at me with an expression that mixed understanding and frustration. Beatrice, she didn't protect you. Why are you still protecting her? It was a valid question that had no easy answer. My phone vibrated with a text message. It was from Lucy. "Mommy, Richard is paranoid about something you told him. What did you tell him about the money? We're at the airport waiting for our flight, and he won't stop checking the bag." I smiled as I showed the message to Emily. "They're going crazy." Emily laughed. "Perfect. Let them suffer a little. They deserve it after everything they put you through." I didn't reply to the message. For the first time in my life, I let Lucy wait. Let her worry. Let her feel the anxiety of uncertainty. An hour later, another message arrived. "Mommy, please answer me. Is there something wrong with the money? Richard says some of the bills feel weird." This time I replied, "Lucy, you decided to rob me and leave without explanation. Now you have to live with the consequences of your decisions. Have a nice trip." The phone didn't take long to ring. It was Lucy, clearly desperate. I decided to answer, but this time with Emily listening to give me moral support. "Mommy, what's going on? Why are you talking like this? Is there something we need to know about that money?" "Lucy, my love, you were the one who decided I had already lived my life, that I didn't deserve explanations, that I should just accept you robbing me and abandoning me." My voice was calm, controlled, very different from the broken woman from that morning. "Now, I'm deciding not to give you explanations." "But we're family. You can't do this to us." Her voice broke into a sob that once would have melted my heart immediately. But now, with the clarity that comes from hitting rock bottom, I could hear the manipulation behind the tears. "Lucy, this morning you told me you deserved the money more than I did because you're young. Now use it and be happy." "Mommy, please, tell me what's wrong with the money." Her desperation was palpable through the phone. Part of me wanted to give in, to explain everything, to protect her like I always had. But Emily squeezed my hand and reminded me with her eyes of everything I had suffered that morning. "Lucy, when you decided to rob me, you lost the right for me to protect you from the consequences." I hung up the phone with steady hands. Emily hugged me. "Beatrice, I'm so proud of you. You are finding your inner strength." The rest of the afternoon passed in a strange peace. For the first time in years, I wasn't worried about what Lucy needed, what Lucy was thinking, what would make Lucy happy. I was focused on myself, on my own feelings, on my own needs. It was such a strange sensation, it almost made me dizzy. Emily left at 5 in the afternoon, but not before making me promise to call her if I felt weak or tempted to rescue Lucy from the consequences of her actions. "Remember, Beatrice, you are not responsible for fixing problems that other people create for themselves." That night I poured myself a glass of red wine that I had been saving for a special occasion and sat on my balcony to watch the sunset. The sky turned violet and orange as I reflected on the strangest day of my life. I had lost my daughter, but I had found something I didn't know I had lost: my own dignity. My phone kept ringing all night, calls from Lucy, messages from Richard, even a voice message from Lucy, crying and begging me to tell her what was going on. Each notification was easier to ignore than the last. With every missed call, I felt like I was reclaiming a piece of myself that I had voluntarily given away years ago. At 10 at night, I received a message that made me smile genuinely. "Beatrice, the money is fake. It's all fake. How could you do this to us? We're stranded in Costa Rica with no real money. This is pure cruelty." It was from Richard, and his desperation was as delicious as the wine I was drinking. For the first time in decades, I went to sleep feeling completely in control of my own life. I woke up the next morning with a feeling I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. There was no anxiety about pleasing someone else, no worry about whether Lucy needed something. There wasn't that constant pressure in my chest that I had carried for so long I considered it normal. I stretched in bed, enjoying the absolute silence of a house that finally belonged only to me. The phone had been ringing all through the early morning, but I had put it on silent. When I finally checked it, I had 37 missed calls and 23 text messages, all from Lucy and Richard, each one more desperate than the last. I read them while I had my morning coffee, as if it were the daily newspaper. Mommy, please, we need help. We're in a cheap hotel in San Jose, and we don't have money to come back. Beatrice, this is inhuman. We are your family. How could you plan this? When did you become so vengeful? Mom, Richard says if you don't help us, he'll never speak to you again. That last threat made me laugh out loud. They would never speak to me again. After robbing me, humiliating me, and abandoning me, they were threatening me by not speaking to me. It was like a kidnapper threatening his victim with setting her free. It was the greatest gift they could give me. I got dressed with care that morning, choosing an emerald green dress I had bought years ago, but never worn because it was too elegant for a woman my age, according to Lucy. I put on makeup for the first time in months, fixed my hair, and looked at myself in the mirror with approval. The woman looking back at me looked dignified, strong, beautiful in her own maturity. I went for a walk around the neighborhood, something I hadn't done in years because I was always too busy working or worrying about Lucy. The neighbors greeted me with genuine warmth, and for the first time, I really saw them as individuals, not just as a backdrop to my daughter-centric life. Mrs. Davis invited me to have coffee in her garden. Beatrice, you look radiant today. There's something different about you. We sat among her red roses and talked about simple things, the weather, her grandchildren, my years as a nurse. It was a normal conversation, with no hidden agenda, no requests for money, no emotional manipulation. It was as refreshing as cold water on a hot day. Linda told me Emily was with you yesterday. She's a good girl, very mature for her age. Mrs. Davis poured me another cup of homemade coffee. Yes, she was like an angel when I needed her most. I didn't go into details, but something in my tone must have revealed I had been through something difficult. Children sometimes disappoint us, Beatrice. They think that just because we gave them life, they've done their part. They forget that true love is reciprocal, not a debt that is eternally collected. Her words were like balm on wounds that were still fresh. Your son, too. My oldest son hasn't spoken to me in 3 years because I wouldn't lend him money for a business I knew would fail. The younger one only comes around when he needs something. She sighed deeply. At first, the pain was killing me, but one day I realized I was crying for children who no longer existed, for relationships that only lived in my imagination. Her words hit me like a revelation. I, too, was crying for a Lucy who perhaps had never really existed, for a mother-daughter relationship that had been an illusion, built on my need to be loved and her need to be supported. How did you move on? I started living for me. I learned to paint. I joined a book club. I made new friends who value me for who I am, not for what I can give them. She pointed to the roses surrounding us. This garden is my pride. Every rose that blooms is a small personal victory. I no longer need my children's approval to feel valuable. I returned home feeling inspired. For the first time in decades, I started making plans that didn't involve Lucy. I pulled out travel brochures I had been collecting for years. Italy, France, Japan, places I had always wanted to visit, but had postponed because the money was better invested in Lucy's future. My phone rang again. This time it was Emily. Beatrice, how are you feeling today? Her voice conveyed genuine concern. I feel free. It's a strange word to describe how I feel, but it's the most accurate. I'm so glad to hear that. Have you heard anything else from them? Lots of desperate messages. They're stranded in Costa Rica with no real money. Part of me feels guilty, but a bigger part feels satisfied. It's natural to feel satisfaction when justice is served, even if it's accidental. Emily had that wisdom that young people who have observed life closely sometimes have. Are you going to help them come back? That was the million-dollar question. The Beatrice from a week ago would have already been at the bank, transferring money for the return flight, apologizing for having fake money in the house, promising it would never happen again. But the Beatrice of today was different. I don't know yet, but I know that whatever decision I make, it will be mine, based on what's best for me, not on what's expected of me as a mother. It was a revolutionary statement, coming from a woman who had spent 45 years putting her daughter's needs before her own. That afternoon, I sat at my desk and wrote a letter, not to Lucy, but to myself. A letter to who I had been, thanking her for all the sacrifices, but also saying goodbye to her. It was time to meet the woman I could be when I lived for myself. The letter I wrote that afternoon was the most honest I had ever written. Dear Beatrice of the past, it began. I want to thank you for everything you did, believing it was the right thing. You worked tirelessly. You sacrificed without limits. You loved without conditions. But I also want to tell you that it's time to rest. It's time for another Beatrice to take control. One who knows that loving doesn't mean destroying yourself. As I wrote, tears fell on the paper, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of liberation, of saying goodbye to a version of myself that had carried too heavy a burden for too long. Every word I wrote was like releasing a stone I had been carrying on my shoulders. The phone rang again. This time I decided to answer, not out of weakness or guilt, but because I wanted to hear what they had to say from my new perspective. It was Lucy, and her voice sounded completely different. She was no longer the arrogant woman who had spoken to me the day before. Now she sounded like a distressed, scared child. Mommy, please, we need help. We don't have money for food, for the hotel, for anything. Richard is furious with me. He says this is my fault for trusting you. Her voice broke at the end, and for a moment, my maternal instinct threatened to resurface, but Emily had planted seeds of wisdom that were now blooming in my mind. Lucy, 2 days ago, you told me that I had already lived my life and that you deserved my money more than I did. What changed? My voice was calm, with no trace of the desperate woman who had answered the phone the morning before. Mommy, I didn't mean that. I was nervous. Richard pressured me to talk like that. Ah, so it wasn't really your opinion. You were just acting under pressure. I paused deliberately. Tell me, Lucy, how many of the things you've said to me in the last 5 years were really your opinions, and how many were pressure from Richard? The silence on the other end of the line gave me the answer I needed. My daughter had been living a lie for so long that she probably didn't even know how to distinguish between her true feelings and those Richard had implanted. But that didn't change the fact that she had chosen to hurt me. Mommy, I know we messed up, but we're family. Family forgives each other, right? It was the classic argument, the emotional manipulation that had worked hundreds of times before, but this time my ears were trained to recognize it. Lucy, family also respects each other, takes care of each other, protects each other. When you decided to steal my life savings, when you told me I no longer had the right to dream of my own house, when you abandoned me like I was trash, where was that family love? But you set a trap for us. You gave us fake money on purpose. Her voice now had a tinge of indignation that I found almost comical. Lucy, I kept money in a chest at your house because I trusted you. The fact that you chose to steal it was not my fault. And the fact that the money turned out to be fake, let's just say it was divine justice. Divine justice. We're your family. You're supposed to love us unconditionally. The desperation in her voice was palpable. And I did love you unconditionally for 45 years. But it turns out that unconditional love from me didn't generate unconditional love from you. It generated abuse, lies, and theft. I hung up the phone feeling a deep calm. For the first time in my adult life, I had set clear boundaries and defended them without apologizing. It was an intoxicating feeling, like discovering I had muscles I never knew existed. That night, I called the travel agency and booked a tour of Italy for the following month. I had dreamed of seeing the Roman ruins, walking the streets of Florence, drinking wine in Tuscany. For years, I had postponed that dream because it was too expensive, and the money was better saved for Lucy's emergencies. Now I understood that my own happiness was no less important than my daughter's. In fact, I had discovered that taking care of my own happiness made me a stronger, more complete person, more capable of giving genuine love instead of desperate love. Emily came to visit me that night with a bottle of champagne. "I'm celebrating your rebirth," she said with a radiant smile. We toasted on my balcony as the stars appeared one by one in the night sky. "Beatrice, there's something I want to tell you. Yesterday, when I saw you take control of your life, you inspired me. I've been in a toxic relationship with a guy from college, and your example gave me the courage to end it." Her words filled me with a different kind of pride than what I had felt for Lucy's achievements. This was a pride based on being a positive example, on helping someone else find their own strength through my own, not my weakness. Emily, that makes me so happy. Sometimes the most valuable lessons come from the most painful moments. Do you think Lucy will learn anything from this? It was a question I had been asking myself too. I don't know, and I've decided it's not my responsibility. My responsibility is to myself now. If she learns, it will be because she chose to, not because I forced her to. That night, for the first time in years, I didn't check my phone before going to sleep. I didn't worry about whether Lucy was okay, if she needed anything, if she was angry with me. I focused on my own plans, on my own dreams, on the woman I was discovering I could be when I lived for myself. 3 months later, I was sitting on a terrace overlooking the Mediterranean, on the coast of Cinque Terre, Italy, sipping a perfect espresso as the afternoon sun painted the sea gold and pink. I had toured Rome, Florence, Venice, each city more beautiful than the last, every day a confirmation that I had made the right decision. My phone was filled with photos of places I had dreamed of seeing for decades, exquisite meals I had savored without rushing, moments of absolute peace I had learned to value. I hadn't heard from Lucy or Richard again after that last desperate call from Costa Rica. Emily had told me that her mother had heard from a neighbor that they had returned to the country, but they hadn't tried to contact me. It was as if they had finally accepted that the well had run dry, that the woman who for years had been their inexhaustible source of resources no longer existed. At first, the first few days of silence had been difficult. 45 years of constant worry don't just disappear overnight. I would wake up thinking about calling her, compulsively checking my phone for messages, feeling a strange anxiety from not knowing if she was okay. But little by little, that anxiety transformed into something completely different: freedom. The woman now sipping espresso in Italy had even learned to wake up each morning asking herself what would make her happy that day, not what she would need to do to keep the peace with other people. I had discovered that I had my own opinions about art, about food, about politics, opinions I had kept silent for years because I didn't want to create conflict with Lucy and Richard. At the Uffizi Museum in Florence, I had stood for a full hour contemplating Botticelli's The Birth of Venus, feeling a deep connection with that goddess emerging from the sea, reborn, complete, and beautiful. For the first time, I understood that I was also being reborn, emerging from the murky waters of a toxic relationship to discover my own inner beauty. The tour had ended the week before, but I had decided to extend my stay, not because I didn't want to go home, but because for the first time in my life, I could make decisions based solely on my own desires. I had the money, I had the health, I had the freedom. Why not enjoy it? My phone vibrated with a message from Emily. "Beatrice, how is your Italian adventure? We miss you around here, but I'm so happy to know you're living your best life." I had been sending her photos and updates throughout the trip. She had become something I never thought I'd have, a genuine friendship based on mutual affection, not family obligation. I replied with a photo of the sunset I was watching. "Emily dear, every day here teaches me something new about myself. Today I learned that I like red wine more than white, that I can walk 5 kilometers without getting tired, and that I'm braver than I thought. I'll be back next week, but I'm already planning the next trip." It was true. I had brochures for Japan waiting for me at the hotel, plans for a cruise through the Norwegian fjords, a list of destinations I had been writing during quiet nights in foreign cities. For the first time in my life, The future excited me instead of scaring me. The waiter approached to ask if I wanted anything else. In my basic Italian, which I had been practicing during the trip, I asked for the check. I had learned a few essential phrases, and every time I managed to communicate in another language, I felt a small personal victory. Beatrice the nurse was becoming Beatrice the traveler, Beatrice the adventurer, Beatrice the woman who lived for herself. As I walked back to my hotel through the cobblestone streets, I thought about the letter I had written months ago to my past self. It was time to write another letter, this time to my future self. Dear Beatrice of tomorrow, I began mentally drafting. I hope you always remember that you deserve love, respect, and happiness. I hope you never again confuse being needed with being loved. I hope you continue to choose your own peace over the guilt that others try to impose on you. Arriving at the hotel, I stopped in front of the lobby mirror. The woman looking back at me had her hair slightly tousled by the sea breeze, her cheeks rosy from the Italian sun, and something in her eyes I hadn't seen in years. Genuine self-satisfaction. It wasn't the satisfaction of having pleased someone else, but the deep satisfaction of having chosen her own happiness. I went up to my room and sat on the balcony overlooking the sea. Tomorrow, I would take the train back to Rome, then the flight home, and begin the next chapter of my life. But I was no longer afraid of the future. I had learned that when you live for yourself, when you make decisions from a place of self-love instead of fear of abandonment, the future becomes an exciting adventure instead of a heavy burden. I picked up my phone and wrote one last message to Emily. Today, I don't need anyone's permission to be happy. See you soon. It was more than an update on my trip. It was a declaration of emotional independence, a manifesto of a woman who had learned to live without apologizing for existing. 6 months after my return from Italy, I was standing in front of the mirror in my new apartment, putting on a pearl necklace I had bought in a small jewelry shop in Venice. It was Friday night, and I had a date. At 68 years old, after decades of believing that romantic love was no longer for me, I had met Javier at the book club I joined after the trip. Javier was 70, a widower for 5 years. And when he looked at me, he saw Beatrice the woman, not Beatrice the available mother, or Beatrice the source of money. Our conversations revolved around books, travel, dreams we still wanted to fulfill. It was refreshing to have conversations where no one needed anything from me, except my genuine company. Tonight we were going to dinner at a restaurant I had chosen, not because it was the cheapest or the most convenient for others, but simply because I felt like eating seafood and watching the sunset from its oceanfront terrace. It was a small but significant freedom, choosing a restaurant based solely on my own tastes. My new apartment was smaller than the house where I had lived for years, but it was completely mine. Every piece of furniture, every painting, every plant had been chosen because I liked it, not because it was practical for when Lucy came to visit. The walls were filled with photographs from my travels. The Roman Colosseum, the canals of Venice, the snowy mountains of Switzerland that I had visited last month. Emily came to have tea with me every Sunday. She had become the daughter of my heart I never knew I needed, a relationship based on genuine affection and mutual respect. She told me about her psychology studies, her plans to specialize in family therapy, and I told her about my adventures and the books I was reading. It was a balanced relationship where we both gave and received equally. Beatrice, every time I see you, you look more radiant, Emily had told me the previous week. It's like you've found an inner fountain of youth. She was right. It wasn't that I looked physically younger, but there was something in my posture, in the way I walked, in the way I spoke, that reflected a confidence I had never had before. 3 months ago, I had received a letter from Lucy, a physical letter sent by mail, not a text message or a call. In it, she apologized for everything that had happened, explained that she had ended her relationship with Richard after realizing how he had manipulated her, and asked for a chance to rebuild our relationship. The letter sounded sincere, vulnerable, very different from the arrogant woman who had robbed and abandoned me, but this new Beatrice had learned to distinguish between genuine remorse and sophisticated emotional manipulation. I didn't answer the letter immediately. Instead, I showed it to Emily and my therapist. Yes, I had started therapy to process 40 years of codependency, and they both helped me analyze not only the words, but the intentions behind them. After much reflection, I had replied with a short but clear letter. Lucy, I appreciate your apology, and I am glad to know you have left a toxic relationship. However, I need more time to heal before considering rebuilding our relationship. If your repentance is genuine, you will understand that forgiveness is a process that cannot be rushed. I wish you the best in your new life. I hadn't heard from her since then, and that gave me peace. If she had really changed, she would respect my boundaries and my need for time. If she hadn't changed, she would eventually pressure me again, and that would give me the confirmation I needed about her true intentions. The doorbell rang, and I felt a genuine excitement, not the anxiety that used to accompany visits in my previous life. It was Javier, punctual as always, with a smile that reminded me why I had decided to give love a chance at this stage of my life. Not because I needed a man to feel complete, but because I had learned that when you love from a place of personal wholeness, love is a gift, not a desperate need. Beatrice, you look beautiful, he said, offering me his arm. He was wearing a white shirt that highlighted his golf tan and those gray eyes that always looked at me with a mixture of admiration and genuine tenderness. Thank you, Javier. You look very handsome, too. As we walked to his car, I thought about how different these butterflies in my stomach were, compared to the constant anxiety I had felt for years. These butterflies were from excitement, from anticipation for a pleasant evening with someone who valued my company. They weren't butterflies of fear of being abandoned or rejected. At the restaurant, as we shared a bottle of white wine and talked about the book we had both finished that week, I realized that this was the life I had always deserved. A life where my opinions mattered, where my tastes were respected, where I didn't have to walk on eggshells to keep the peace. Beatrice, there's something I've wanted to tell you, Javier said, as the sun set in front of us, painting the sky in colors that reminded me of my sunsets in Italy. These months with you have been the happiest I've had in years. Not because you complete me. We are both complete on our own, but because we choose to share our complete lives. His words went straight to my heart. It was exactly what I needed to hear, that I was loved for who I was, not for what I could give. Javier, I feel the same way. With you, I've learned that true love doesn't hurt. It doesn't demand. It doesn't exhaust. It nourishes. It respects. It celebrates. As we returned home that night, with Javier's hand in mine and the stars shining above us, I reflected on the path that had led me to this moment. Lucy's betrayal had been the most painful and most valuable gift of my life. It had forced me to wake up from a nightmare of codependency that I had mistaken for love for decades. Now, at 68 years old, I had finally learned the most important lesson of all. You don't need anyone's permission to live your own life. Did you enjoy my story? What a journey it has been. I truly wonder, what would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have chosen silence to keep the peace, or would you have done what I did to reclaim your dignity? Let's meet in the comments below. I'm so curious to hear your thoughts. I'm reading every single one. Which city are you listening from tonight? If my story resonated with you, you can support me and help me bring more stories like this to the world by sending a super thanks. Your sweet support means the world to me and allows me to continue this journey with all of you. On the screen now, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend you watch next. There are so many more on my channel, each with its own lessons and triumphs. Don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell so you never miss a new chapter. Thank you for being here with me. Until the next story, with love and respect.